The morning sun was rising over the massive U.S. Joint Security Military Complex, casting sharp light across the steel gates and reinforced checkpoints. The entire base was already alive with movement, soldiers marching, vehicles rolling in, scanners blinking, and armed guards positioned at every critical point. This was not a place where mistakes were tolerated. And today, something unusual was about to enter it. At Gate 7, two armed security guards stood with rifles hanging firmly across their chests. Their eyes scanned every incoming personnel with strict precision. Every badge was checked, every identity verified, no exceptions. Then she arrived. A young U.S. Army girl stepped out of a black transport vehicle alone. No escort team. No high-ranking officers waiting for her. No visible insignia of importance. Just a standard military uniform, slightly dusted from travel, and a black carry bag in her hand. Her face was calm, almost too calm. Her name tag read, Carter. One of the guards noticed her immediately and frowned. "Who is she?" he asked quietly. The other guard shrugged. "Don't know, looks like regular enlisted." Carter walked straight toward the gate without hesitation. The first guard stepped forward, raising his hand. "Halt, this is a restricted entry point. Only authorized personnel with verified clearance can proceed." Carter stopped instantly. Not nervous, not surprised. Just patient. "I need to pass through," she said simply. The guard looked her up and down again, more carefully this time. There was nothing special about her appearance that demanded attention. No medals on her chest. No patches indicating elite division. Nothing that suggested high-level authority. He smirked slightly. Everyone needs to pass through, but not everyone gets to. Carter didn't respond to the tone. She reached into her pocket and calmly pulled out her military ID. The guard took it with 2 fingers, as if it might already be a problem. He swiped it once on the scanner. Beep. A red light flashed. Access level insufficient. The guard sighed, almost amused. "Basic enlisted profile," he said loudly enough for nearby soldiers to hear. A couple of them chuckled. One leaned on the railing. "Wrong gate, maybe." Another added, "People get lost all the time." Carter remained silent. The guard handed back the ID without even trying again. "You can't enter this zone. This is for classified operations personnel only. Move aside." Still no reaction from her. That silence began to annoy him. He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Listen, I don't know who told you to come here, but this is not a training area. This is real security protocol. If you keep standing here, you'll delay operations." Carter finally spoke again. "I'm not here to argue, just verify it properly." That sentence made a few heads turn. The guard raised an eyebrow. "Properly?" He chuckled and gestured to the technician nearby. "Fine, let's humor her." The technician walked over, slightly annoyed, and took the ID. He inserted it into the secondary verification terminal, the one reserved for higher-tier military identities. At first, everything seemed normal. The system began scanning. Loading profile. The technician tapped the screen once. Standard soldier database, this will be quick. But then something strange happened. The loading bar stopped at 23%. It froze. The technician frowned. "That's odd." He tried again. "Retrying." Still nothing. The system didn't continue. Instead, the screen flickered once. Then twice. And suddenly, the terminal went black. For a brief moment, everyone thought it was a technical glitch. The guard laughed again. "Told you, probably fake credentials." But Carter's expression didn't change. Not even slightly. And that was what made the technician uneasy. He restarted the system. This time, multiple terminals in the checkpoint connected automatically, as if responding to a hidden command. The technician stepped back slightly. Why is the system linking all nodes? The senior guard frowned. What does that mean? Before anyone could answer, every screen inside the checkpoint turned black at the same time. Silence fell instantly. Even the background noise of vehicles outside felt distant now. Then on every screen, a single line appeared. Security override request DATCTD. The technician blinked. That shouldn't be happening. The guard's confidence started to fade slightly. Fix it. He tried typing commands. Nothing responded. Instead, another message appeared. Identity verification, pending higher authority approval. A soldier whispered from the side, higher authority than base command. No one answered. Carter stood there quietly, still holding her bag. As if this was normal. The senior officer of Gate 7 was called immediately. Within minutes, a middle-aged man in full decorated uniform arrived, his expression serious and controlled. "What's the situation?" he demanded. The technician pointed at the screens. "Sir, her ID triggered a full system lock." The officer frowned deeply. "That's impossible." He turned toward Carter. "And you are?" Carter replied simply. "Carter." He nodded slowly, then turned back to the system. "Run it again." The ID was inserted once more. This time, the system didn't even attempt to load normally. It reacted instantly. All screens flashed red. A warning sounded across the checkpoint. Unauthorized access to classified profile DETCTD. The officer froze slightly. That wording was not standard. He stepped closer. "What level is this profile?" The technician shook his head. "It doesn't display normally, sir." The officer narrowed his eyes. "Force override." The system responded immediately. And then, everything stopped. Every monitor in the entire gate area shut down simultaneously. Even backup systems failed. A heavy silence filled the air. Then slowly, one screen rebooted. Only one. And what appeared next made every single person in the checkpoint stop, breathing for a moment. A file opened. Slowly. Almost deliberately. As if the system itself was waiting for permission. And then it displayed. Name Carter. The officer leaned closer. The next line loaded. And his expression changed. Status, active classified command unit. The guard who mocked her earlier stepped back unconsciously. Another soldier whispered, "No way." Then the third line appeared. And everything broke inside the room. Clearance level, Omega authority. The officer's face went pale. He whispered, almost unable to believe it. "Omega clearance doesn't exist in our system." The technician shook his head quickly. "Sir, I didn't input that." Then the final line appeared. And silence completely swallowed the room. All local command structures report to Subject Carter during active OPERATIONS. No one spoke. No one moved. Even the guard who mocked her earlier couldn't look at her anymore. Carter finally adjusted her bag slightly. Still calm. Still composed. But now the entire room was different. Because they were no longer looking at an ordinary soldier. They were looking at someone they were never supposed to stop. And part 1 ended with one chilling realization spreading through the entire checkpoint. They had not delayed a soldier. They had just delayed someone who could override the entire system. The entire checkpoint stood frozen. No one spoke. No one moved. The words still glowed on every screen like a warning that refused to disappear. All local command structures report to Subject Carter during active OPERATIONS. A heavy silence pressed down on Gate 7 like a physical weight. The same guards who had been laughing minutes ago now avoided eye contact with each other. The atmosphere had shifted completely, like reality itself had changed rules without warning. The senior officer slowly stepped closer to the main terminal, his jaw tight, eyes locked on the screen. "This cannot be real," he muttered. The technician swallowed hard. "Sir, the system is not generating it manually. It's coming from an internal classified layer I've never seen before." The officer turned sharply, "Then unlock it." The technician hesitated. "I can't. It's sealed under higher authority encryption. Not even base command has access." A tense silence followed that sentence. Then one of the soldiers at the back whispered, without meaning to, "Higher than base command. What does that even mean?" No one answered. Because no one knew. Carter stood slightly away from the group, still holding her black bag, calm, motionless, watching everything unfold like she already knew how it would end. That calmness made the situation worse. The senior officer finally turned toward her. "You," he said sharply, "what is your real assignment here?" Carter looked at him. A pause. Then she replied simply, "I already told you, verification." The officer frowned. Verification of what? Carter didn't answer immediately. Instead, she looked at the main screen. And for the first time, the system reacted again. The screen flickered. Once, twice. Then a new command line appeared without anyone touching the terminal. Secondary authorization, request DETACTED. The technician stepped back instantly. "I didn't trigger that." The officer narrowed his eyes. "Then who did?" No one responded. The room felt tighter now, like the air itself had become unstable. Then suddenly, every communication device in the checkpoint beeped at the same time. Radios, monitors, even handheld scanners. All of them displayed the same message. Classified network link established. A low alarm tone echoed through the building. Not loud, but deeply unsettling. Carter finally spoke again. "You're still using the old protocol framework," she said calmly. The technician blinked. "Old protocol." Carter nodded slightly. "That's why it's stuck." The officer turned sharply. "Stuck in what?" Carter looked at him directly now. "In systems that no longer exist." That sentence hit harder than any alarm. A soldier near the gate whispered, "What does that mean?" But before anyone could process it, the main terminal suddenly rebooted again. This time not into a warning screen, but into something else entirely. A secure interface appeared. Black background, red border, no branding, no identification. Just a single rotating symbol in the center. The technician froze. "I've never seen this UI layer before." The officer stepped closer. "What is it?" Carter answered before anyone else could. "Field Command Interface." The room went silent again. The officer turned toward her slowly. "Field Command belongs to which division?" Carter paused for a moment, then replied, "It doesn't belong to a division." Another silence. Even the air conditioning sound felt louder now. The technician tried to type into the system, but his keyboard didn't respond. "It's locked," he said nervously. "It's not accepting local input." The officer's patience was breaking now. "Then override it." "I can't, sir. It's not in our registry." The officer snapped, "Everything is in our registry." But even as he said it, He realized how untrue that sounded now. Because the screen was still active. And it was waiting. For someone. Carter stepped forward slightly. And for the first time, she placed her hand near the scanner. Not rushing. Not hesitating. Just precise. The moment her fingerprint touched the scanner, everything changed instantly. The entire checkpoint lights dimmed for half a second. Then came back brighter. But different. More sterile. More controlled. A deep mechanical voice echoed from the speakers. Authentication accepted. Every soldier froze. The officer stepped back slightly. That's impossible. Only Central Command can trigger that response. Carter didn't react. The system continued. Welcome back, Subject Carter. A few soldiers actually looked around, confused. Welcome back, one of them whispered. She's been here before, another asked. But Carter's expression stayed unchanged. Because this wasn't new to her. The interface on the screen shifted again. Now it displayed multiple layers of access. Strategic operations. Global field authority. Omega clearance access. Direct override protocol. Each layer lit up one by one, as if recognizing her presence. The technician stepped away completely now. I'm not touching that system anymore. The officer turned toward Carter, his voice lower now. Who are you really? Carter looked at the screen for a second. Then back at him. I already answered that. The officer shook his head slightly. No, you didn't. Before Carter could respond, the system suddenly displayed something new. A file began opening. Slowly, deliberately, like it had been waiting for years to be accessed. The title appeared. Project Black Veil, active clearance required. The entire room reacted instantly. Even the senior officer's expression changed. That project was discontinued, he said quickly. The technician nodded. Yes, sir, it was terminated years ago. But the system didn't stop. It continued opening the file anyway. As if termination meant nothing to it. Carter watched it calmly. And said softly, it was never terminated. The officer looked at her sharply. What did you say? But before she could answer, the file opened fully. And every screen in Gate 7 displayed a single classified image. A global operations map, covered in red zones, unknown coordinates, hidden military installations, and at the center of it all, one label, highlighted, flashing, Operator Carter. The room went completely silent. No jokes, no confusion, just shock. The officer took a slow step back. You're a field operator for this. Carter finally looked at him directly. No. A pause. Then she added, I am the authorization layer for it. That statement broke the room's understanding of everything they knew. Because authorization layers weren't supposed to be people. They were supposed to be systems. The technician whispered, almost in disbelief. That means she is the system. Carter didn't confirm. Didn't deny. But the screen suddenly changed again. And this time, a new alert appeared. Field Event DETCTED. Unauthorized human access to Project Black Veil. The alarm tone returned. But louder this time. Outside the checkpoint, distant sirens began to activate across the base. One by one. Spreading. Like a chain reaction. The officer turned toward the exit. Locked down the facility. But it was too late. Every gate door in the complex had already sealed automatically. The system had taken control. And Carter, was still standing in the center of it all. Calm, unmoved, as if this was exactly what she expected. The final screen message appeared in bold red letters. Phase 1, confirmation complete. And just like that, everything changed. The entire military complex had changed in seconds. What was once a controlled checkpoint was now a sealed fortress under automated lockdown. Heavy steel gates slammed shut across all sectors with a deep mechanical roar. Emergency lights flashed red across the corridors. The sound of alarms echoed through every hallway like a warning that something inside had gone terribly wrong. But no one outside the system had triggered it. It had triggered itself. Inside Gate 7, soldiers were frozen in place, watching the screens flicker between operational maps and emergency protocols. The words on every monitor were the same. Phase 1, confirmation complete. Nobody spoke for several seconds. Then the senior officer finally broke the silence. "This is a base-level malfunction," he said firmly, but even his voice carried uncertainty. "We need manual override access." The technician shook his head quickly. "Sir, manual override is disabled. The system isn't responding to any local command input." A soldier near the gate tightened his grip on his rifle. "Then who's controlling it?" No one answered. Because deep down, they already suspected the answer, but didn't want to say it out loud. Carter stood near the center of the terminal area, still calm, still quiet, still watching. And that calmness was starting to disturb everyone more than the alarms themselves. The senior officer turned toward her again. "This started the moment your ID was scanned," he said sharply. "What did you trigger?" Carter looked at him. Not angry, not defensive, just composed. "I didn't trigger it," she said calmly. The officer frowned, then explained this lockdown. Before Carter could respond, a new alert suddenly flashed on every screen. "External security breach, DATACTD." The entire room froze again. A soldier at the side stepped closer to the window. "Sir, there's movement outside the perimeter." The officer turned sharply. "What kind of movement?" The soldier hesitated. "Multiple unidentified vehicles approaching fast." The atmosphere shifted instantly. The technician looked at the screen. "That's impossible. No external units are scheduled for this sector." But the radar feed now confirmed it. Dozens of black, unmarked vehicles were moving toward the base perimeter. Vast, coordinated, military-grade formation. The officer immediately grabbed the radio. "Identify incoming convoy." Static. Then nothing. All communication channels had gone dead. Another soldier shouted, "Sir, they're jamming us." The officer's expression tightened. "This isn't a malfunction anymore." Carter finally looked toward the main screen again. And for the first time, her expression changed slightly, not fear but recognition. "They're early," she said quietly. The officer turned toward her sharply. "Who is they?" Carter didn't answer immediately. Instead, she stepped closer to the terminal. The system responded instantly. The screen shifted again, bypassing all previous menus. A new alert appeared. "Project Black Veil, Compromise Event DETCTD." The technician stepped back. "That project again." The officer turned sharply. "What is Black Veil?" Carter finally spoke. "It's not a project," she said. "It's a containment protocol." A pause. Then she added, "For something that was never supposed to reach this level." Before anyone could ask more, a massive explosion echoed in the distance. Not inside the base. Outside the perimeter wall. The entire structure shook slightly. Dust fell from the ceiling panels. A soldier shouted, "They've breached the outer gate." The officer immediately barked orders. All units to defensive positions. Secure Gate 3 and Gate 5. But when he tried to transmit the command, nothing went through. The system had already taken priority control. A new message flashed across all internal displays. Defense SYSD MS transferred to Central Authorization Node. The technician looked at Carter slowly. "No, don't tell me." Carter met his eyes and said nothing. That silence was enough confirmation. The officer took a step toward her, anger mixing with disbelief. "You said you weren't controlling this system." Carter replied calmly. "I'm not controlling it." Another explosion shook the base. Closer this time. Carter continued. "I'm just the only one it listens to." That statement changed everything in the room. Before anyone could respond, the main terminal suddenly activated full tactical view. The entire base layout appeared in 3D projection. Red zones were expanding rapidly from the outer perimeter inward. Enemy units were marked in real time. Highly coordinated. Highly trained. This wasn't a random attack. This was planned. The technician pointed at the screen. "They're moving like they know the layout." The officer narrowed his eyes. Inside intel. But Carter was already watching the pattern. Her eyes tracked the movement silently. Then she said, "No." A pause. "They don't need inside intel." Everyone turned toward her. Carter continued. "They built this system." The room went completely still. The officer frowned. "What are you talking about?" Carter stepped closer to the projection and tapped once on a specific zone. The system zoomed in instantly. A hidden underground access route appeared. Unknown to base command. Unknown to local engineers. The technician stepped back. "That tunnel doesn't exist in our records." Carter replied, "It was erased from yours." Another explosion hit the outer wall. This time stronger. The lights flickered briefly. Emergency sirens intensified. The base was now fully under attack. But not randomly. Strategically. Carter turned slightly toward the officer. "This is why the system activated," she said. The officer's voice lowered. "You knew this would happen." Carter nodded once. "Yes." A long silence followed. Then the officer asked the question everyone wanted to ask. "Then why are you here now?" Carter looked at the central screen, at the Black Veil protocol still flashing in red, and finally answered. "Because they finally found the signal." Another explosion echoed, this time inside the outer defense ring. The breach had moved closer. Fast. Too fast. Soldiers began taking positions. Weapons ready. But something felt wrong. The system wasn't giving them normal tactical responses anymore. It was adapting. Automatically rerouting defense patterns. Predicting enemy movement. And blocking internal commands that would interfere. The technician whispered, "It's not just responding, it's fighting back." Carter nodded slightly. "Yes." The officer turned toward her again. "Is it on our side or theirs?" Carter paused for a moment, then said, "It doesn't recognize sides." Another explosion. This one inside the secondary perimeter. Now panic started to spread. Soldiers shouted orders. Footsteps echoed across corridors. The base had turned into a live war zone. And still, Carter stood calm in the center of it all. The main screen suddenly flashed again. A new alert appeared. Black Veil containment failure, 12%. Then, 14%. Then, 17%. It was increasing. Rapidly. The officer stepped back slowly. What is increasing? Carter answered quietly. The thing they came for. Outside, the sound of heavy weapons fire echoed closer. Metal gates were being forced open. Explosions lit up the outer walls. The enemy was inside the complex now. The technician looked at Carter, fear visible in his voice. If this continues, the entire base will fall. Carter finally adjusted her position. For the first time, she placed her hand near her tactical side holster. Not fully drawing a weapon. Just preparing. And said, "No." A pause. "It won't fall." The officer looked at her. "Then what will happen?" Carter looked at the screen one last time. And replied, "Phase 2 begins." At that exact moment, all internal lights turned white. Every screen across the base changed at once. And a single command echoed through the entire facility. Field authorization, ACTIVATED. The system had stopped defending. It had started responding. And Carter was no longer just observing. The entire military base had entered a state beyond lockdown. It was no longer controlled by human command. It was controlled by something deeper. Something older. Something that had been waiting. Inside the central command hall, white emergency lighting replaced all normal illumination. Every screen, every terminal, every communication device now displayed the same phrase. Field authorization, ACTIVATED. No one moved for a moment. Not because they were ordered to stay still, but because they didn't understand what was happening anymore. The officer slowly turned toward Carter. His voice was lower now, controlled but shaken. "What does field authorization mean?" Carter didn't answer immediately. Instead, she walked toward the main tactical display. Each step was calm, measured. Around her, soldiers held positions, weapons raised, but not aimed at her. Not yet. They didn't know what she was anymore. The technician whispered, almost to himself, "This isn't a command sequence. It feels like a takeover." Carter stopped in front of the projection. The base map was still visible. But now it was changing. Enemy positions were being marked automatically in real time. Internal routes were being sealed. Defensive structures were activating without human input. The system wasn't reacting anymore. It was executing. Carter finally spoke. "Field authorization means," she said calmly, "the system stops waiting for permission." The officer frowned. "And starts doing what?" Carter looked at him. "Protecting the objective." A heavy silence followed. Then, a distant explosion shook the entire facility. Closer than before. Much closer. The enemy had reached inner containment levels. Soldiers outside shouted over comms that were now partially failing. Sector 4 breached. Enemy inside Corridor B. Request backup. Repeat, request backup. But every request was being intercepted by the system itself and replaced with automated responses. Unnecessary deployment. REPOSITONING initiated. It wasn't chaos. It was controlled war. The officer clenched his jaw. "This system is overriding our troops." Carter nodded once. "Yes." A pause. "Because they were never supposed to fight this." The technician stepped forward slightly. "Then what were we supposed to do?" Carter looked at him. "Survive until I arrived." Another explosion shook the floor, this time inside the main east corridor. Metal twisted in the distance. The enemy had fully entered the central structure. And now footsteps echoed through the hallways. Slow. Heavy. Organized. The officer immediately raised his weapon. Defensive formation. Soldiers aimed toward the entrance doors. Tension filled the air like a live wire ready to snap. The door at the end of the hall slowly began to deform. Something on the other side was forcing it open. Carter didn't move. The technician whispered, "They're here." The door finally exploded inward. Smoke filled the corridor. Silhouettes stepped through. Armored. Unknown insignia. Highly advanced tactical suits. Not standard military. Not any known Allied force. The officer shouted, "Identify yourselves." No response. The intruders raised their weapons. But before a single shot could be fired, the entire hall lights flickered and froze. Every enemy soldier suddenly stopped moving. Not because they chose to, because something had locked them in place. A digital suppression field activated across the room. The system had intervened. The officer looked around in shock. What did it do? Carter finally stepped forward. And for the first time, she spoke directly to the intruders. "You're early." One of the armored figures tilted their head slightly. Then a distorted voice came through their helmet. "Carter." The name echoed strangely, like it wasn't spoken, but recognized. Carter stared at them. "You weren't cleared for Phase 2 entry." A faint mechanical sound came from the intruder suit. Then the voice responded. "Phase 2 was never yours to control." The officer looked between them. "Who are they?" Carter didn't answer immediately. Instead, she looked at the central screen. The system responded instantly. A new file opened. Black Veil True Origin Access. The technician froze. No, that file was sealed permanently. But it was opening anyway. Carter finally spoke. "They are the original operators." A silence fell. Then she continued. Before the system had command protocols, there were field units. The screen displayed classified footage. Unknown missions. Global operations. Unmarked soldiers. Then, a symbol appeared. The same symbol as the intruders. The officer's voice dropped. "You mean they built this system?" Carter nodded. "Yes." A pause. "And I stopped it from collapsing years ago." The technician looked horrified. "Stopped it or contained it?" Carter didn't answer. The intruder voice echoed again. "You were never supposed to exist in this layer, Carter." Carter finally turned toward them fully. Her tone changed slightly. Colder now. "I was created because this layer couldn't be controlled." The officer's eyes widened slightly. "Created?" Carter didn't look at him. Her eyes stayed on the intruders. "Yes." The system suddenly escalated again. Black Veil containment failure, 78%. The entire base shook. Alarms screamed across every corridor. Lights flickered violently. The technician shouted, "It's breaking through containment completely." The intruders raised their weapons again. But Carter lifted her hand slightly. And instantly, all weapon systems across the hall deactivated. Every gun locked. Every trigger disabled. The intruders froze. The officer stepped back in disbelief. "You just shut them down." Carter replied. "No." She looked at the system display. "I just reminded it who it belongs to." A long silence followed. Then, the system made one final shift. The screen went completely white, and a single line appeared. Primary authorization, RESTORED. The intruder voice turned distorted. "Impossible." Carter stepped forward slowly. You tried to escape containment, she said, but you were never outside it. The system suddenly initiated full lockdown. The intruders' suits began shutting down one by one. One collapsed, then another, then all of them. Silence returned to the hall. Only the sound of distant alarms remained. The officer slowly lowered his weapon. What just happened? Carter turned slightly toward him. Phase 2 correction. The technician swallowed hard. So it's over. Carter looked at the screen. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, no. A pause. This was only the test. The officer frowned. Test. Carter nodded once. And then, the final system message appeared. Phase 3 preparation initiated. The entire base went silent again. But this silence was different. Heavier. Final. Carter picked up her bag again and started walking toward the exit. The officer called after her. Where are you going? She didn't stop walking. She answered without turning back. Where it begins. The doors opened automatically in front of her. No resistance. No delay. Just recognition. As she stepped outside, the night air hit the base grounds. Helicopters were landing in the distance. Emergency reinforcements arriving too late to understand what had already happened. Behind her, the entire military complex stabilized. Systems restored. Containment secured. But the truth was now known only to a few. The technician looked at the officer and whispered, "Sir, she wasn't part of the system." The officer slowly nodded. She was the reason it still exists. Carter stopped at the edge of the runway. For the first time, she looked up at the sky. And in a soft voice, almost to herself, she said, "They'll try again." A faint system tone responded in the distance. Not an alarm. Not a warning. But acknowledgement. The screen inside the base displayed one final message. Subject Carter active. Mission continues. And then, it faded.